The significance of the City View students being upfront and talking to administrators is that it's the young people's voice. It's their school, they have to feel safe, and they need to be empowered to take that message to the administrators and to the teachers. So hearing from young people, I could do this workshop. I could probably do it with my eyes closed, but it's nowhere near as powerful as if you put young people who have a vested interest in making their school safe at the front of the room.
Well, all the principals came from all over Ontario and maybe even Canada, so it's important because they each have their own school, and what our goal is to get an all-gender washroom in every school, or multiple all-gender washrooms in every school, and so by giving our message out to tons of different educators from all across, then they can start to take the steps to make an all-gender washroom in their school, and they can be educated about this and they can teach others about it.
Today was a really important audience. I think the administrator level is so crucial in giving the green light for the activist students to make the changes, and to realize that they have an obligation to do so, but to feel excited about making those changes as well. I think the change to the laws in Ontario was a huge shift and so recent. Toby's Act was passed in 2012, and then the Safe and Accepting Schools Act was passed, and that laid the legal framework for moving forward with an all-gender washroom, because it now put gender expression and gender identity into the Ontario Human Rights Code, which means we have a duty, a legal obligation to accommodate. But the nature of that accommodation was what was really crucial. That it's important that administrators understand the implications of the legal changes and the impact on changing the school, rather than looking to accommodate individuals. How can we collectively, with the law behind us, move forward?
The history of all-gender washrooms in the TDSB really go back to about 2011, when the board first published its guidelines for the accommodation of transgender and gender non-conforming staff and students. So within that guide, it lays out best practices and procedural guidelines for administrators to implement changes to spaces based on individual accommodated needs of students for their gender identity and gender expression, but also the removal of barriers and the recognition of that, which also comes from the Ontario Human Rights Code. So you put all of those pieces together, the TDSB accommodation guidelines and these changes to the code legislation and the Education Act legislation, and there is a real groundswell of interest and willingness, and also an obligation on the board and on our administrator and staff teams to be more responsive in terms of removing barriers to access. And we recognize that washrooms are one of those barriers.
I think that a lot of principals really liked our presentation, and they really took what we said seriously. So I think that a lot of them are going to go back to their schools and either look at the space that they have and see how they can expand that space, or they're going to look at, if they don't have a single stall washroom, then making one or making a multi-stall washroom, and also how to educate their community. And we've also done one for students as well, so we've kind of done it for both sides already. So we can teach the principals how to teach their kids about it, and teach the kids about how to teach their teachers about it. So I think that all in all, it's been that everyone will start to take action.
I think the biggest impact has been that we've learned how to make it a priority and build it into our curriculum and build it into an awareness. That was a strategy that we had to learn. It wasn't something that just flowed. It's been something that's been coming around. With the gender-based violence team, we've worked very closely with them, and they helped us make it a conversation with staff, a conversation with the administrators, and then have that conversation with students, and then move it to the community. So it's been a process, and learning the process, making it about what is necessary to remove all the barriers in our schools.
We reached out to the gender-based violence team, and they were in the PowerPoints that they presented. They had lots of examples of it being implemented at other schools and how it's working out really well there. And I didn't have a whole lot of resistance at the school. People no, it's important that people feel included and to feel comfortable and safe at our school.
We think it's important to have an all-gender washroom at every school, actually. And at City View, the whole curriculum is taught through the lens of social justice, and through those discussions and the curriculum, it came to light, and the kids started to think deeply about things that they were learning. And they started to look at the pictures on the door of those sort of stylized pictures. The person with pants, it's a boys' washroom, and the skirt's the girls' washroom, and they started to question these things. And then ask, why isn't there an all-gender washroom? And so that's where it all came about. So empowerment of students, student voice, all those things made it necessary, we felt, to have an all-gender washroom.
People started thinking about it and just wondering, why don't we have this? This is a good idea. People learned about that they exist, that all gender washrooms, and as soon as people were aware of it, they were thinking, why doesn't City View have it?
We happened to talk about if there was a transgender student, what gym class would they go to? And our teacher said, well, whichever gym class they feel comfortable going to. And then I think some students thought, well, how about with the bathrooms? If they might have a discussion with the gym, what do they do when it comes to the bathrooms? And we all decided that, well, this is something we need to have at our school.
And people were raising questions like, oh, why don't we have like gym with the boys, or why don't we have gym with the girls? And so I think it kind of like a bunch of different issues almost made it like blossom into kind of one great accomplishment.
People who don't necessarily identify as just male or female, they might be non-binary or transgendered. It's really important to have a safe environment for everyone, and when you have an all-gender washroom, it's not exclusive to one sex or gender, so everyone can feel safe going to the washroom.
What we find at the workshops are that some of our trainers share that from a very young age they knew that they didn't want to use a boys' washroom or a girls' washroom, and they felt uncomfortable and wished that there was another option. And so we know from research that kids identify from a very young age, and so really it's just about everybody should have access to all the options no matter what age they are.
Going to the boys' bathroom was weird because people would be like, why are you here? Because I used to have really long hair like down here. And then going to the girls' bathroom, they'd be like, why are you here? You're supposed to be in the other bathroom. So then going up there to the all-gender bathroom was just like so great.
What we wanted to do is transform the mindset from responsibility for individuals to go to an accommodated space like a single stall, where if you think about it, the entire rest of the community doesn't have to be responsible or even think about the issue, to one where you have a multi-stall where everybody is collectively engaged in creating systemic change and safety within the school space. And that was a high priority for us.
A lot of people actually do go in this washroom quite often, and it's kind of considered like a normal thing.
First you think it's going to be weird if you're washing your hands and you see like one of your male classmates, but it's not at all. It's, you kind of go with the flow, and a lot of people are really comfortable, and if they weren't, they still use the gendered washrooms, which was okay, but we were all really cool with it.
And they could just understand what it's really about. It's not about a place for kids to hang out. It's just a bathroom to make everyone feel safe and included.
In a way, that's the really cool thing about it. It's a big deal, but it's not like the small thing. But I feel like it just generally makes everyone feel like more safe, because when you're going in there, whether it's as transgender or gender nonconforming or transsexual, whichever, when you're going in there or when you're straight, you're showing those people, I'm an ally, I'm here, and I want to make you feel safe.
I think if you're trying to open an all-gender washroom at your school, you really need to not just ask to open it, you have to explain why you want to open it.
So initially there was a lot of concern from a few parents in particular, and they were really worried, weren't sure, wondering if it would have, people would skip class to spend there, people would do sexual things in there, there would be violence. And so we had a parent information night where people could come and ask questions, and all the students, they could get a sense from the students that they weren't going to do anything like that, and the staff could reassure them.
And the same boundaries and respect that we would expect from students in a single gender washroom would be the same expectations in any other gender washroom. I think that there's a propensity to think that whenever we mix students of different genders together, that somehow the rules are thrown out the window, and that really comes from the way that we've been socialized and the way that gender has been socially constructed.
In segregating genders, what we've done is we've created this myth around each gender role, and we've socialized it to a point where we fear the other. And I think administrators really need to think about the big picture. And if they can get the big picture and understand it and embrace it, then really it's a matter of having conversations with parents so that they too understand it and they come on board. And you have no better allies than your parent communities.
And so I think parents who weren't really sure about that after they came to that information session, they were pretty on board.
You would have a mix of still single gender washrooms as we do already, as well as all gender washrooms, so that any student feels that they have free and open access to feel included whenever they choose to use whichever washroom they're most comfortable using.
What's the purpose of a washroom? It's to go, do what you need to do, wash your hands and move on. So if we actually create this open space where everyone can learn how to respect each other's boundaries, I don't see it being any different in an all-gender washroom. So if you can get that happen in a school, then the impact would be that you would have young men, women, however they identify, be able to see themselves beyond their imposed gender roles.
How are we going to do this? What steps are we going to take? Because when we're talking about a major change to the physical location of the school, you're going to have to think about what's the messaging for staff, what's the messaging for students. This isn't about an individual accommodation request. This is something larger than that. This involves the whole school population, so that automatically means there's an impact on school climate, which means there's an education piece, both for the staff team and for the student team. And when we approached it with CityView, they were very keen for us to also involve the parents in the discussion, let them ask questions, but also give them a little bit of education. And so all of those elements were brought together. We even engaged the school trustee in that case, and the local superintendent. And so everybody had the same information. Everyone had a hand in developing that plan collaboratively, so there were no surprises. And very much the school owned not just the decision to put the washroom in place, but the steps along the way as well. So it helped empower the school itself, and you see that in the voices of the student leaders.
The best advice I could give is thoughtful preparation, and including student voice and welcoming in parents and not being afraid to open it up and have a community meeting. So if you've done a lot of preparation work, there's a lot of understanding around the issues and the kids are on board, and by the time you get to the parent meeting, you've sort of crossed off all the, the worries that people might have. So I think that's the thing. It's in the preparation and it's in the understanding the issue and just the broader issues of respect and welcoming and having a, safe space for everybody and being inclusive. And I think once people understand that, then I think the rest is just logistics. Where's it going to be? Where's the sign that says all gender washroom?
From having to choose and not knowing which one to go to, you get picked on and then all this stuff happens. And so basically the reason for the all gender washroom is just to make the students feel way more safe and not you have to choose one or the other and we're putting you in a box and you have to do this because you're not allowed to do anything else.